Waiting for the cameras on. Anyway, Lara Spirit is here, Times Red Box reporter. How are you?
Hi, I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, tip top. Absolutely, absolutely pumped and loving life.
Your giant Toblerone.
Big Toblerone, big cup of coffee, everything's fine with the world. What do we think is going to happen at PMQs today?
Well, of course, it's the eve of the local elections, so we're likely, if we don't see direct reference to it, we're likely to see Keir Starmer use messaging that we've obviously seen him use in the campaign trail before, probably in line with the typical Prime Minister's Questions performance that we see, which is usually the whole reference to the on your side, various different references to public services that Keir Starmer believes have been completely battered by, in his words, 13 years of Tory rule. So I think we'll see that again. Last week we saw him brand Rishi Sunak Mr. 24 tax rises. Obviously the week before we saw Sunak brand him so softy, so we'll probably see some sort of immature label along that line from one of them today as well, I'd imagine.
The Sun who originally coined so softy has really leaned into it since, and every day they seem to be using that photo of Keir Starmer with a Mr. Whippy on his head.
But I think you made the good point that nobody really knows whether it's softy with a Y or with an IE.
Or double E.
No one can possibly think that's the correct way to spell softy.
Oh, the cameras are on. The cameras are on. Morning to you on the YouTube channel. Who was the first out the block this morning? Stephen says hi from a very sunny Taunton. Edward is in Hertfordshire. Robert's in Hanslope. Jonathan is in Uckfield in the sunshine. Sunshine everywhere. Keith is in West London. People. Right. There's the bed. Right, it's nice. It's only an hour to go. There's elections in Taunton. Taunton Town Council, I think, there's an election there. Morning from Fleet. Rich is in Fleet. Hello from Godstone on the Isle of Wight. Wiltshire, Northants, Liverpool, Sleaford. Nobody from outside the UK yet.
It's a shame.
So if you're watching outside the UK, or if you're listening outside the UK, get on the YouTube channel. You'll be back to round up the best of the rest. Go and put your headphones on. Lara will sit through all the boring questions so that you don't have to. Up next, Shipman and Ayesha Hazarika will be here to pause the action live. It's PMQs Unpacked, live on Times Radio and on the Times Radio YouTube channel.
Across the UK, on DAB digital radio, on the free Times Radio app, and via your smart speaker, this is Times Radio.
It's 12 o'clock. I'm Matt Chorley. This is Times Radio. At the moment, PMQs Unpacked. But first, a look at the headlines this lunchtime. A Canadian chef has been charged with aiding suicide after a Times investigation linked his sale of a poison to a string of deaths, including 4 in the UK. Kenneth Law, who allegedly sold a lethal substance through the post, was arrested in Ontario yesterday in connection with 2 deaths in the region. A young boy has been arrested after 8 children and a security guard was shot dead at a school in Serbia. 6 more pupils and a teacher have been injured following the attack in the capital Belgrade this morning. Cold calls on financial products could be banned and suspicious payments paused in a bid to fight fraud. It's now the most common crime in the UK, with 1 in 15 of us falling victim and costing £7 billion every year. And the government's not complacent about the scale of the security operation needed for the King's coronation this Saturday. Minister says the arrest of a man outside Buckingham Palace last night shows they're fully prepared for the day. And we'll have a full news and sport roundup at past. But now, live on Times Radio and the Times Radio YouTube channel, it's time for this.
PMQs Unpacked on Times Radio. Unpacking the politics and cutting through the crossfire.
Yes, it's PMQs Unpacked. And we thought for just a bit of added fun, this week we'd bring in Times Radio's very own Ayesha Hazarika. Ayesha, how are you?
Greetings, Matt. How's your hangover?
We don't need to.
I love that sigh.
We're not.
I can smell it.
We're not giving a running culture. We thought it'd be a bit of fun if you're having it in here. But Tim, he's here.
Oh my goodness.
He's here. Tim Shipman's arrived. On the right mic, right on that microphone.
Very good.
How are you, Tim?
I'm very well. I think Keir Starmer should go on the how nothing works on Britain's railways.
Your train was cancelled, but you've made it. You've made it.
Yeah.
Heroically.
Now, Ayesha, you've but in your previous life, you used to prepare people for PMQs. What would you suggest Keir Starmer go on today?
So given that it's the final PMQs before the local elections, which is really important for both men, big test for Rishi Sunak, first at the ballot box, but also important for Keir Starmer, I think housing is something which I think Keir Starmer should go on. It's a really, really big issue. They're trying to, particularly with the U-turn on tuition fees, which has upset quite a lot of younger voters. I think kind of housing is something which will sort of get back on that track. It's a big issue all over the country. I've been speaking to lots of Labour candidates that have been out door knocking, and it's something that's coming up. It's coming up on the doorstep all over the country. Labour have a bit of a policy on it, which is quite good.
Wow, that's something, isn't it?
They said that they would, bring back those mandatory targets. Sadiq Khan in London's got a bit of good news on that today, and I think they'll go hard on this idea that Rishi Sunak might resurrect Help to Buy.
Yeah.
So I think that's quite a neat dividing line for them.
And actually, Tim, there was an interesting column by Patrick Maguire in the Times this week. The Labour Party even looking at the Green Belt. They think that there were bits of the Green Belt that could be built on.
I think most people who look at housing policy think quite a lot of the green belt is actually brown and could be built on. The problem is that the second you raise it,
the Telegraph launches the campaign.
The Daily Telegraph will launch a campaign, and various Tory MPs will have utter conniptions. I think one of the great irony of the brief Liz Truss period is that she spent her whole time going on about how she wanted economic growth, but yet she allowed the scrapping of housing targets, which was the one thing that was A, bad for the generation Ayesha's talking about, but B, completely undermines any claim she would have to be pro-growth. I'm told they had this policy and they kept trying to chuck various ideas at it to make it pro-growth, and the officials just kept turning around saying, sorry, you've scrapped the targets, so whatever else you do, you're not going to make it into a pro-growth policy. It's completely impossible. So, housing, along with high-speed rail, nuclear power, is on a long list of things where both main parties have completely failed this country for the last generation.
I also think as well, but just because it's the final one before local elections, you're going to see a lot of really bad messaging towards the end, where they sort of try
really
and
terrible slogan rehearsal.
Yes,
Well, as long as they're so bad, they're good. That's what we need.
Now, one thing we do need to check, Ayesha, is can you do an impression of Bungle from Rainbow?
Ed or
We're not repeating this, are we?
I still can't remember why, but for some reason last week Tim and I ended up doing impressions of Zippy and George from Rainbow. So if you could do a Bungle, that would complete the set.
I can't even remember how
Bungle.
I vaguely, he was like the big hairy
one. Big hairy bear.
Yeah, I can't quite remember that.
Well, we'll work on that in the next half an hour.
I did do a good Ed Miliband impression.
You did a very good Ed Miliband.
Yeah, a bit of bad impression is very good. We may well return to that.
Thanks. That's what I'm here.
We found some people watching on YouTube from around the world. Stuart is in afternoon from the Caspian Sea.
Wow.
Shrey is in Australia.
Yeah, I don't think they watch Rainbow down there, to be honest.
Somebody in Bath. Somebody on the YouTube says it is Softy, SOFTEE, Mr. Softy. I'm not sure that's someone's in upstate New York, Gravesend, Maidavale, Moorgate. Lots of you. Asaka. That's probably the furthest away. Stuart, very good afternoon to you. Right, we're gearing up. We're ready to go to the House of Commons, and this is question number 1 from Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in his comments about the coronation? Across the House, we're all looking forward to the celebrations this weekend. Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister know how many mortgage payers are paying higher rates since the Tory party crashed the economy last autumn?
Well, Mr. Speaker, our record on home ownership is crystal clear. Because of our tax cuts, 90% of first-time buyers now don't pay any stamp duty at all, Mr. Speaker. And last year we saw the largest number of people buying their first home in 20 years, Mr. Speaker. That's a Conservative government delivering on people's aspirations to own their own home.
Well, there we are, Ayesha, going on housing.
Yeah.
Exactly right. I suspect that Keir Starmer knows the answer to that question, which we'll get in just a moment. Interestingly, Yvette Cooper on the front bench, but we'll come to the housing issue in a moment.
Coronation. Did you watch their faces?
Yes.
Yvette Cooper nodding agreement. Angela Rayner looking like, well, maybe we'll get a day off to go down the pub with my mates or something.
But Yvette Cooper, lots of briefing about Yvette Cooper. She's in the Times today insisting that she shouldn't be sacked.
And saying she's very much sort of is happy with the adverts now and sort of fine that she wasn't consulted on them, even though it wasn't her policy brief. Yeah, I mean, I'm really surprised at the briefing against Yvette Cooper because I do think Yvette is a very solid performer on the front bench. I mean, she's incredibly smart. I think she is pretty good.
She?
I think she has helped Labour get a kind of cogent sort of position on immigration, because immigration's a nightmare topic for Labour, because you've got the hard left of the party who are pretty much open borders, and then you've got a very full-on Conservative Party that is really pushing this issue. So I actually think she's done some quite good work on this. I'm really surprised by it, and I think Keir Starmer should have slapped down. I mean, I know people in his office have slapped down these people a bit. But it doesn't bode well, because she is smart. She's really well respected in the party. And, okay, she's not sort of, dazzling personality. I'm at there, but she's not on manoeuvres either. She doesn't want to be leader. I think she's quite diligent. She's quite a sort of swotty kind of thinking person.
Can I make a counter-argument?
Yeah.
That she was the shadow Home Secretary for the entire time that Theresa May was Home Secretary, and did such a good job that Theresa May ended up becoming Prime Minister. And she's had absolutely no impact in the job this time out.
I don't think that's her fault that Theresa May became Prime Minister.
No, but I mean, she where when David Davis used to see off a Home Secretary about once a year. I don't think she has any impact at all, whether it's up against Priti Patel or...
I think it's probably easier for Tories to see off Labour Home Secretaries than vice versa, because for the reasons Ayesha says about the views in the party.
But she has managed to steer the party.
She's
The party's
very
now leading. It's doing much better on immigration than it has done in a long time, and crime.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Anyway, that's got nothing to do with home ownership. Anyway, let's go back to the House of Commons. And Keir Starmer, I'm sure, is about to answer his own question. This is question number 2.
Mr. Speaker, the question was how many people are paying more on their mortgages each month. And the answer that the Prime Minister avoided giving is 850,000. Nearly 1 million people paying more on their mortgage each month because his party used their money as a casino chip. That's why George Osborne called them economic vandals who created a self-inflicted financial crisis. Not for the Prime Minister and his non-dom thing, not for the super wealthy they gave tax cuts to, but for mortgage holders all across the country. So, does the Prime Minister know how many more people will be joining them on higher mortgage rates by the end of this year?
Mr. Speaker, thanks to the actions we're taking, in fact, the Bank of England is showing that public expectations of inflation have now eased to a 15-month low, Mr. Speaker. Consumer confidence is at the highest level that it's been at since Russia invaded Ukraine. And because of our stewardship of the public finances, we can see a clear way to reduce debt and bring interest rates down. But, Mr. Speaker, he keeps in this habit of quoting the former Labour shadow chancellors. We know that our plans will deliver lower inflation and lower interest rates. But we know that his plans just mean more debt, Mr. Speaker, and I quote, year after year after year. Those aren't my words, that's the assessment of the former Labour Shadow Chancellor.
Bit of a misstep there, wasn't there? He seemed to be saying George Osborne was a former Labour Shadow Chancellor, which, some people would argue that some of the things George Osborne did help the Labour Party, but I don't think that was quite the point of
it feels like this edition of PMQs needed a previously of PMQs.
There is a little bit of that.
The non-dom thing, was that last week or the week before?
No, that was last week, and he looked a bit casually dismissive about it, and so
yes.
Starmer did a bit of an impersonation.
He keeps going about the non-dom thing.
And he dragged up Osborne and the economic vandals again, and we talked a little bit about this last week, didn't we? Whether they'll make vandals a bit more of a theme that goes... Now, I know some of the people who prepare Keir Starmer for Prime Minister's Questions listened to our show last week, so I should be interested to see if they've taken that on board.
Rainbow fans.
That was why they listened to it, because they wanted to hear the rainbow.
But it's interesting hearing Keir Starmer just continually raise the spectre of Liz Truss. Liz Truss and Nicola Sturgeon are the two women that have really helped him out now.
And actually, Rishi Sunak can only present himself as sort of a change government.
But Sunak should stand up, shouldn't he, and say, I said all this. I said it was a disaster.
Yeah.
I said Liz Truss was wrong. I was right.
Yeah.
The reason I'm standing here, leader of the opposition, is because I've said it was all nonsense and I'm sorting it out.
Up after the vandals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, it's quite difficult to do that and maintain party unity.
And watch the faces of your colleagues
but
behind you.
But my God, that's what he should do.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. He doesn't seem proposed to do that now. Right, we go back to now, question number 3, which will be answering Keir Starmer's question number 2. How many more people on top of the 850,000 will be paying for their mortgages? Let's find out now.
Mr. Speaker, the question was how many more people this year are going to be paying more on their mortgages? And the answer that he avoided giving again, he knows these answers. He's got the stats there in front of him. 930,000 people. So by the end of this year, I know they don't want to talk about it, that's why he won't answer the questions. By the end of this year, nearly 2 million homeowners, counting the cost of the Tories' economic vandalism with every mortgage payment they make. And it's not just those who already own their home that are counting the cost of Tory recklessness. The average deposit for a first-time buyer is going up to £9,000. Does he even know how long it would take an average saver to put that sort of money aside?
Mr. Speaker, that's why, Mr. Speaker, that's why we've introduced a 95% mortgage guarantee scheme, Mr. Speaker. It's why we're helping people in social housing own their own home through our first homes and our shared home ownership schemes. But, Mr. Speaker, I said these things are working because I said last year we had a record number of first-time buyers, the highest number in 20 years. It was, Mr. Speaker, twice the number of first-time buyers than Labour ever managed, Mr. Speaker. So whilst Labour failed homeowners, the Conservatives are delivering for them.
I mean, I suppose that answer, Tim, is why Rishi Sunak can't trash what went before him, is because he's now trying to claim credit for what happened last year, which is actually Boris. I mean, I suppose not. Some houses might have been sold during Liz Truss's time. But he's simultaneously trying to distance himself from his predecessors while also claiming credit for their successes.
It is the perennial march of all governments. You know, I mean, the genius of Boris Johnson was to pretend he was a different government from the one that had gone before. Rishi Sunak hasn't quite pulled that off in the same way. Though, ironically, he's almost as much of a change from what went before policy-wise as Johnson was from Theresa May. Johnson pulled it off. If Sunak can't, then he's going to get a lot of these questions over the next, year or so.
And the fact that Keir Starmer is just hammering this message of economic vandalism and really going on mortgages, to me as well, that's not just a kind of a red wall set of messages that works. That is a set of messages that actually works all across the country, because even when I was in Scotland last week, people were raging about their mortgages going up. So I think that he feels like he's on quite good kind of one nation territory here.
And the beauty of it is a messaging thing. We've got 2 million people directly affected, but they've all got parents,
relatives,
children,
and
brothers,
exactly.
Whatever. People talking about it. And everyone else with a mortgage is therefore worried about it when they come off the back of a mortgage. And everyone who wants to get a mortgage is worried about it.
And shout out to Starmer for the way he frames these questions as well. Does he even know how long it would take someone to save £9,000? I've just done a quick calculation. Sunak cleared about £2 million last year. It's about 18 hours work. Yeah. For the Prime Minister,
but also
to get £9,000.
But you're so right, Matt. It's the fear of fear itself around mortgages, isn't it? And it's so hardwired into us. Tim will remember this during the final throes of the Scottish referendum. One of the stories that really swung it back round in favour for unionists was a story saying your mortgages could tank off the back of independence. And that made a lot of people go, whoa, hang on, I did not sign up for this. Mortgages feels like it's something which is so tangible to people, and it gets straight into, it's your family, it's what you're saving up to pass on to your family. People are very squeamish about it.
And it's actually more powerful than the sort of Remain campaigns. Everyone will be £4,000 worse off. And that felt a bit...
It really brings it home, literally.
Yeah. So we've had 2 mentions of vandalism so far. Somebody on the YouTube channel says Keir's really shown restraint to have not mentioned kamikaze budget yet. But I wonder whether the vandalism thing is actually better than the kamikaze budget.
Or early days.
Yeah, it's early days yet. We've only 3 questions in.
I wouldn't rule out omni-shambles by the end of this.
Let's see if we get another.
Happy days.
Let's see if we get another Vandals. Let's go back to the House of Commons. So this is PMQs Unpacked on Times Radio and on the Times Radio YouTube channel. We go back to the House of Commons for question number 4.
Mr. Speaker, every week, whatever the topic, he stands there and pretends everything is fine across the country. And every week he does so, he reinforces just how out of touch he is. £9,000, £9,000 would take 4 years. They think it's funny that 4 years for the average saver to save £9,000. Or to put it a different way, in terms the Prime Minister will understand, roughly the annual bill to heat his swimming pool. But for most people, 4 more years of scrimping is a hammer blow to their ambitions. And now he's kicking them when they're down, because his decision to scrap housing targets is killing the dream of home ownership for a generation. Why doesn't he admit he got it wrong and reverse it?
Mr. Speaker, I promised to put local people in control of new housing, and I'm proud that that's what I delivered within 6 weeks of becoming Prime Minister. Now, he wants to impose top-down housing targets, he wants to concrete over the green belt and ride roughshod over local communities. Now, previously, Mr. Speaker, he did say, he's on record in saying, local people, local communities should have more power, more control. Now he's U-turned. Just another in a long list of broken promises.
Starmer's doing quite well here, isn't he?
Yeah.
This is one of his
Apart from that,
better
he's
outings.
obviously got no idea how much it costs to heat a swimming pool. I mean, if you can do it for $9,000 a year, I mean, I don't have a swimming pool, but I'm
Is it?
Yet.
aware of some people
Yeah,
that
give it
do,
time.
and
Yeah.
I think you'll find it costs quite a lot.
Yeah,
more
but
than
that was
I think.
quite a good
It was a good
attack
line,
line.
yeah.
Oh,
That
it was a very good
good
attack
line.
line.
I've written oof down. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like that's like a proper. I mean, again, this is like a very good. He's building up an argument. He's gone in on something very emotive, something which is sort of resonates with people with the mortgages. And now, look, housing targets are a little bit more kind of geeky, but they do matter to people because people have now made the link between targets and delivery. And that line Rishi Sunak said, "Oh, you're just going to concrete over the greenbelt." There are many, as you say, mothers, fathers, grandparents who would like a bit of building over the greenbelt so that their kids or grandkids could get a nice house.
And for, frankly, an old-style Tory dry on the economy who believes in doing stuff, that's deeply disingenuous from Sunak. That's a total suck-up to his own party.
The other thing...
He knows the numbers, and he knows that that's what leads to growth, and he can't do it.
His other reference to just another one of his broken promises.
Well,
Oh,
that's
honestly.
the next thing, though, isn't it? This
Because-
is what we're going to get more of now. And it does show up in the focus groups. People say about Starmer, oh, he keeps changing his mind, he keeps U-turning. And, that I suspect, we've only had 4 questions so far. I'll be very surprised if we don't hear an answer that involves tuition fees and U-turns and all that sort of stuff.
A bit of Sue Gray.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, there's not very much of Rishi
We have to
Sunak's...
cross ourselves as well.
There's not very much of Rishi Sunak's leadership promises which have survived contact with reality. I suppose, they're both guilty of saying one thing to try and run for leader and then doing something different.
Yeah, I suppose the thing for Starmer, though, is this thing is beginning to stick a little. There's all these things going on social media of him saying, I absolutely 100% pledge that this is going to be in my manifesto. And it's like, oh. And, Rachel Reeves was out this morning doing a doughty defence saying, look, things change. Look, we can't commit to stuff. Things are going to change. I suspect that will get clipped up and used as part of the attack lines against Labour. Look, the reality is, why should Keir Starmer cling to what was not just an election-losing manifesto, but the Labour Party got absolutely humped at the last
No, but maybe
general
he should
election.
cling to what he promised when he ran for Labour leader.
But that was part... Yeah, I mean, but that was also part of him having to get control of the party at the time. And
You're allowed to lie as long as you're doing in the left.
Yes. As long as you're doing in Jeremy Corbyn, you can say what you like.
That seems to be the approach. And actually,
But
to
I
be
do
fair
think
to
it's gonna be a
Ayesha,
problem.
that is a quite widely held view in the mainstream elements of the Labour Party. You
Yeah.
do what you have to do to beat these people. And then, but I think Starmer's changed a bit, actually, as well. I think he was, people who grew up with him say he was pretty left-wing. I think he imagined when he took over that there might be a way of taking control, but keeping, the sort of soft to reasonably hard left, but not the far hard left. And he realised when he took over that wasn't possible, actually, and that he needed to just grab hold of this thing and take it somewhere practical that
And
was
very
likely
ruthless,
to be ruthless and make it electable. And he realised these people didn't want to go on that journey with him. They wanted to stick there and mouth their popular nostrums, that they've held to for decades.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that has changed him as a politician and as a person.
Yeah. I mean, look, Jeremy Corbyn's wife this morning has tweeted saying that she thinks Keir Starmer's got sort of a severe mental health issue because he keeps changing his mind on things. So,
Whereas Jeremy, of course, never changed his mind about anything
No.
in 60 years.
Yeah.
and that did brilliantly for the Labour.
Here's an interesting point there. Andrew's just posted on the Times Radio YouTube channel. I like Starmer. I like this version of him over the hard left leadership election version. The question is, if I vote for him, which version is the real one?
Well, and that's the question the Tories need to put into voters' minds, isn't it?
What
If
are you
you
gonna
take
get?
the view that he's now being pragmatic and he'll stick to it, then there's not much to fear if you're one of those voters. If you think he might start getting pushed around by the unions and people who know how to organise, then, that's always a concern.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say, having spent a bit of time with him, I think I do agree with what Tim said. I think he's been on a journey.
Yeah.
But I do think now he is ruthlessly focused on not just scraping over the line into Downing Street. He doesn't want to limp into Downing Street. He wants a convincing win.
He is not a mean Vasa, as
yes,
they say.
absolutely. And he wants to not just win for one term. He wants to win for 2 terms, and he realises he's got to send that message out now to people. So whoever messaged in, that actually is the germane question. If I'm a Labour strategist, that is the germane question I want to answer to your listeners and all our listeners and to all these people across the country, to say, look, this is who I am now. I have been on a journey, but I'm ruthlessly pragmatic. I'm going to do what's right for the country, not what's right in terms of my ideology.
And also, the thing with the tuition fees thing, he should take that on the chin as well and say, the reason I can't commit to that is because this is a Labour Party that is not going to pour money down the drain. Yeah. We need to check everything is affordable before we commit to it. And he can turn that then into the sort of economic kind of, the sort of Rachel Reeves argument that you can trust Labour with the economy and make a virtue of the fact that he's changed his mind about this thing. Because, of course, Keir Starmer would like to give free tuition fees to people. The fact that he's not, it's there for a reason. Because they want to look, like they're competent on the economy.
But also,
and he should shout that from the rooftops.
On the free tuition fees, it sounds great and it sounds fantastic. It trips off the tongue really easily, but it isn't quite like the amazing thing that is. If you look at Scotland, which does have free tuition, it's actually seen as quite a middle class subsidy. It's kind of, there is a cap on the number of students that can go. What would be a better, and see, this is the thing, right? It's fine to say I'm not doing this policy. That's fine. What he and his team have got to do is fill it with something. This is what the alternative is. That's what they've got to do quickly now. They could look at bringing back a decent maintenance grant. They could look at doing, better things in terms of how it's sort of paid back, maybe move to more of a sort of graduate tax system. But it's one thing to, I think, change your mind on things, but he does need to start sort of saying, right, this is what I'm doing instead.
Yeah.
Well, that's where a graduate tax is much more straightforward because you can set it at different levels. This always has been a graduate tax, and most people never end up paying back what they owe. And however many times the papers write about that, it never seems to quite get through to people that if you're not making that much, you don't really have to pay much of it back.
Yeah. Well, let's go back because we've still got 2 more questions to get through. This is question number 5 from Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the only power is given to local communities not to build houses. And we know why he won't change course. He admitted it last month. His councillors simply don't want to build the houses local people need, so he's given them a way out. Picture the scene as he explains this to a family. Mum and Dad paying £4,000 extra on the mortgage because the Tories tanked the economy. Their eldest paying hundreds more in rent. Their youngest still stuck in the spare room because they need an extra £9,000 for a deposit. Then along comes the Prime Minister and merrily tells them, sorry for crashing the economy, we don't want to talk about that. Sorry I can't help you with the house building, but my councillors don't like it. Oh, and before I go, here's a massive council tax increase for your troubles. Why doesn't he stop the excuses, stop blaming everyone else, and just build some houses instead?
Mr. Speaker, our memories on that short. We all know what happened last time when they were in power. There was no money left for the country. But let's talk about the record.
Timeless.
Let's talk about the Labour record on house building, Mr. Speaker. In London, the former Conservative mayor built 60,000 affordable homes in his first 5 years in office. How many did the current Labour mayor manage? Half of that, Mr. Speaker. In Wales, we need 12,000 new homes a year. How many have Labour built in the last year? Half of that, Mr. Speaker. As ever, Labour talk and the Conservatives deliver.
Oh, what a joyous moment that
Boris
was.
Johnson
The
delivered.
former Conservative mayor. Let us not give him his name.
We won't name him. Well, presumably he's not there.
Well, he's presumably not there, but you can imagine him now climbing the walls at the fact that Rishi Sunak won't give Boris Johnson a shout out for building twice as many houses as Sadiq Khan. What a wonderful moment that was.
Someone says, please, it is 2023, and they're still talking. You can't keep harking back to there's no money left.
Oh, I mean, that note was getting. Greg Hands is taking it on tour. It's like an installation. It might win the Turner Prize at some point, like that. I mean, it is a bit.
I hope they've got a photocopy. I hope they're not damaging the original.
Oh, me too. They've probably had loads of them.
Needs to
made
be in a
up.
museum somewhere.
Well, that should be the National Archive, shouldn't it?
Exactly.
I mean, it was. Yeah. I mean, look, I think it was a stupid note for Liam Byrne to have done personally. But I'll tell you the villain in all of this, David Laws.
Yeah.
David Laws is the one that sort of leaked it. There is a tradition where people do these notes, and actually, when they do come out, they're very interesting. They're often a snapshot of history. There's some interesting humour. There's some interesting advice. David Laws did it while all the time as an orange booker going along with all the austerity that, David Laws was not the person standing up against the Conservative Party at the worst point of...
Lib Dem splitting discord between the Tories and Labour. Who would have thought it?
I know. But
of all the directions I thought today might go, I didn't expect to...
Slagging off David Laws.
Well, it's the letter. But interesting, again, we hear Keir Starmer at the beginning. That was quite an effective riff. I thought he sort of painted that picture of the sort of, reality of many middle-of-the-road, middle England families.
Not even
you're
that.
saving
Probably
up for
the
your
vast
kids.
majority of them these days.
That was a good picture to be painted.
And he was quite relaxed, and he was sort of, conversational, and it felt like right, well, let's go back to see if Boris Johnson gets another mention.
Or the note.
Or the note.
Maybe he's got it with him.
Brandishing it. Yeah.
He should do that. He should start
Having
turning
my
up
hand.
at PMQs every week,
I've
waving
got
a
it
piece
here.
of paper. Yeah.
I have in my hand a piece of paper. That always goes down very well for Prime Ministers. Right, let's go back to the House of Commons. This is question number 6 from Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, debt doubled since 2010, growth down, tax up, the economy crashed. Mr. Speaker, they're going to need a bigger note. And it's right. But week after week, we debate the issues facing in this place. But looking beyond the elections tomorrow, we also have a hugely significant weekend coming up with the King's coronation. For most, this will be the first time they've seen a monarch crowned. And I hope, and I know across the House, people will hope that people across the country enjoy the ceremony, the street parties, and of course the extra day off. 300 million will tune in. The world will see our country at its best, celebrating the beginning of a new chapter in our history. But it will also be a reminder of the loss of our late Queen, Elizabeth II, and a chance again to remember all that she gave to our country through her dedicated service. So will the Prime Minister join me in honouring our late Queen and wishing the new King a long and happy reign?
I bet he doesn't.
Mr. Speaker, as I said at the outset, we're all looking very much forward to the coronation. It will be a very special moment in the history of our country, and I know that we will join with the country in celebrating it. But before we get to the coronation weekend, Mr. Speaker, we
Just
have an
got my
important day
own
tomorrow,
valedictory
and the choice
here.
before the country is clear.
A bit of a...
When they go to that ballot box, they can see a party that stands for higher council tax, higher crime, and a litany of broken promises, Mr. Speaker. Meanwhile, we're getting on with delivering what we say with lower council tax, lower crime, and fewer potholes. The choice is clear. Vote Conservative, Mr. Speaker.
I
Potholes.
mean, it takes some skill to go from, can you pay tribute to the late Queen, and managing to answer.
It doesn't take skill, it just takes a bit of brass neck, to be honest. I mean, well done, Starmer. That was his old technique of trying to take the sting out of it at the end.
Yeah,
he used that months ago. He used to use that quite a lot.
John Michael says this is a very good to stop Rishi doing the big partisan finish.
It's a class. I mean, it's the equivalent of sometimes, just doing 5 questions.
Yeah.
And then sort
You
of
don't have to use the full
you
6.
don't, and sometimes that was an effect if you were really in trouble. I mean, it's not a very honourable thing to do, but it is a good device. Or you can split things 3 and 3.
Yeah.
You can sit down after 3 and let other people. But that was. I mean, very smart of Keir Starmer to try and block him off, but it was hilarious to see. You could see Rishi Sunak with a Richter grin on his face going, I will pay tribute to the late Queen, but I'm just going to do a sewage dump of attack lines.
It's what you
right
do when
now.
you're writing a news story in a newspaper, and then you just write meanwhile. And then just stick whatever else you felt like on the
Elsewhere.
end of it.
It's always one of my favourites.
But I loved it. High crime, high, and then suddenly potholes in the middle of
Fewer
it.
potholes.
Can I just say, though, you groaned, Matt, but I did rather like "You're going to need a bigger note" at the start, a riff on "You're going to need a bigger boat" from Jaws.
Yeah. Bang up to date cultural
It's
reference.
not, well, yes.
Or we're going to need some bigger buns.
But you say it's not
Girls.
bang up to date. It was that has been a riff recently around the fact that the government brought a bunch of barges for the asylum seekers. And I've seen quite recent sort of memes saying you're going to need a bigger boat because they'd filled it up within about a week. So I thought that was had some redeeming qualities as a cultural reference point.
We can't really discuss cultural reference points given that we talked about rainbow some length last week. So, what?
Cutting edge stuff here.
Absolutely bang up to date.
Well, we thought you were going to raise the tone.
I'm not familiar with Rainbow.
You're not familiar with Rainbow?
Oh, I know it a wee bit, but I can't really remember that much about it.
Well, we've got 5 minutes now. We can find something for you on YouTube. Stay on YouTube, though, because we'll be back in a moment. Lara Spirit's been watching The Best of the Rest so that you don't have to. We'll round that up in just a moment after we get the latest news, Melanie Sherwood.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
Thank you, Matt. Good afternoon. A Canadian chef has been charged with aiding suicide after a Times investigation linked his sale of a poison to a string of deaths, including 4 in the UK. Kenneth Law, who allegedly sold a lethal substance through the post, was arrested in Ontario yesterday in connection with 2 deaths in the region. The Metropolitan Police says there are no specific security threats to Saturday's coronation after a man was arrested with a knife outside Buckingham Palace. He allegedly began throwing shotgun cartridges over the gates last night and a controlled explosion was carried out on his bag. Officers are appealing to the public to alert police to anything suspicious. Despite this, the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said he's looking forward to the celebrations at this lunchtime's PMQs.
I know the House will join the nation and the Commonwealth in sending our very best wishes to their Majesties the King and Queen ahead of the Parliament. This will be a moment of extraordinary national pride, a demonstration of our country's character and an opportunity to look to the future in the spirit of service, unity and hope.
The SNP has employed new auditors to replace the firm which quit working for the party 6 months ago. They've just weeks to go before a deadline to file accounts with the Electoral Commission or risk losing £1.2 million of funding. And a young boy's been arrested after 8 children and a security guard were shot dead at a school in Serbia. 6 more pupils and a teacher have been injured following the attack in the capital Belgrade this morning. In the weather, a fine and dry afternoon ahead, best of the sunshine in the southeast, rain over parts of Scotland. Jake Robson has the sport.
Leeds have announced Sam Allardyce as their new manager until the end of the season in a last-ditch bid for Premier League survival. With just 4 games to go, the club sits in 17th in the table, only outside the relegation places on goal difference. Known as Big Sam, the former England boss is reportedly on £3 million for the short stint and has admitted to White and Jordan on TalkSport he didn't see it coming.
Shocked. I never thought at this stage of the season, I thought there would be no jobs offered at all. And of course, when the phone popped up with a name that I knew pretty well, I knew it was straight away. So it took me about 2 seconds to say yes.
The 68-year-old becomes Leeds' 3rd permanent manager of the season. The Times chief sports reporter Martin Ziegler says it's an understandable appointment.
Sam Allardyce has returned to Leeds. I mean, it's a last roll of the dice, isn't it, for the club? They're staring relegation in the face. They've had an absolutely disastrous run. Allardyce is somebody you would say, with 4 matches left, is just about the best person they can get to try and get themselves out of this fix.
Arsenal have condemned the shining of a laser into the face of a Chelsea player as a fan was arrested over the incident last night. Television cameras at the Emirates Stadium picked up a light being beamed in the direction of the Ukraine international Mikhailo Mudryk, who'd been jeered after coming on as a second-half substitute for the visitors. The forward had been close to joining the Gunners in January before instead signing for their London rivals and was targeted with the laser during the 3-1 home win, which saw Mikel Arteta's side move back to the top of the Premier League table. And 6 former Yorkshire cricketers are expected to find out their punishment for their part in the Azim Rafiq racism scandal later. Last month, an independent panel found former England players Tim Bresnan and Matthew Hoggard were among those to have used discriminatory language towards Asian players during their time at Headingley. The Cricket Discipline Commission can impose fines, suspensions and order them to do education or training courses. And to read more on whether allowing Australian captain Steve Smith to play 3 games for Sussex ahead of this summer's Ashes is a bad idea or not, go to the Times app and website.
This is Times Radio.
My name is Charity. I am currently working as a project coordinator for Mesa Sans Frontier in South Sudan, where right now displacement, floods, and spiraling prices mean many families cannot afford to eat. Malnourished children have reduced immunity, which means they often cannot fight off infections or deadly diseases. It is not enough to say that malnourished children need food and food alone. You need medicine and you need therapeutic food. Medical care is crucial, and when it is available, it is amazing to see how quickly children bounce back. Please give £30 by searching MSF Medicine or call 0800 200 222. A donation of £30 could make a big difference in the life of malnourished children, a life-saving difference. Call 0800 200 222. Thank you.
John Pienaar at Drive, this afternoon from 5 on Times Radio.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker, this is Times Radio.
Very good afternoon to you. It's Matt Chorley on Times Radio and on the Times Radio YouTube channel, where you're all saying, if only you could lip read. I don't think we were saying anything on the camera that, would have been an issue. Tim Shipman's got some breaking news, some coronation breaking news, Tim.
Oh, yes. 41% of the population would like the king to grow a beard for the coronation.
According to?
The Beard Liberation Front, Matt.
I can't work out if it was higher or lower.
I don't know. Doesn't seem like enough people if you're a member of the Beard Liberation Front.
Yeah, you'd want it. I think they probably wanted to be higher.
It seems high enough, though, doesn't it? More importantly, Labour have put out a meme on their Twitters of Rishi and David Cameron on the Jaws boat.
It's not David Cameron, it's Jeremy Hunt.
Oh, it's Jeremy Hunt, is it?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well,
there we go.
Which would make more sense.
It must have been done quite... It would make more sense.
Yes, I don't think... Whoever's done it, I think, probably needs another lesson, photoshopping lesson.
Well, it could be an advert for the skills agenda. That,
we're going to need a bigger note, obviously, because of... Yeah.
We're going to need a bigger digital budget.
Lara Spirit's here. She's been watching the best of the rest so that we didn't have to. Overall, what have we missed?
You've missed a lot of backbench MPs talking about the local elections and asking the Prime Minister to either agree or disagree that their respective parties should be rewarded in tomorrow's polls. So you didn't really miss much in relation to quite a lot of those questions.
You've sat through that so that we didn't have to. Are we kicking off, though, with Stephen Flynn from the SNP?
Yeah, as per usual, we're kicking off with Stephen Flynn, but this time not with a dig towards Rishi Sunak, but actually towards Labour, which I think is very interesting, accusing Rishi Sunak, or accusing Keir Starmer, rather, of having had his Nick Clegg moment with regard to the recent news we saw, obviously, on tuition fees. So take a listen to this, because it's an interesting slight change of tack from Stephen Flynn to his usual Wednesday appearance.
Mr. Speaker, in 2010, David Cameron convinced Nick Clegg to drop his pledge on university tuition fees. Does the Prime Minister intend to take the credit for convincing the leader of the Labour Party to do likewise?
Prime Minister.
This is something like that, then.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for the question. I'd say it's hard to keep up, Mr. Speaker, with a list of broken promises. What I would say on tuition fees is I'm proud that under this government we now have a record number of people that are going to university from disadvantaged backgrounds, Mr. Speaker, and that's because the efforts we've placed to put more money into supporting those people and those communities to fulfil their aspirations, alongside fantastic new apprenticeships in every part of our country.
Ayesha, interesting that Stephen Flynn, quite cleverly, because it was still technically in order, but using it to attack Labour rather than the government. And actually, Keir Starmer looked a little bit, was it almost blushing?
Peaky.
I think he was I think that won't have bothered him. It's really interesting how the dynamic has changed, and that is fascinating. So you have an SNP leader not choosing to hammer the Tories on many, many bad things that are happening. Poverty is going up, food banks going up. Also, I was in Scotland last week doing a political debate show, and a lot of people in Scotland are furious about the coronation as well, and the cost of the coronation, etc., etc. So the fact that he uses his precious questions to attack Labour shows that is what they're really... They see their competition now, it's basically Labour. They've got to attack them in Westminster, attack them in Scotland. I mean, interestingly, the show I did, the Tory politician barely said a word. All the sort of two-way was between the SNP and the Labour politician.
Well, that's where the battle for seats is, isn't it? I mean, it's that straightforward. I mean, it's quite telling, though, if you're a Tory, that the biggest cheer of the entire session was not anything the Prime Minister said, but something that the leader of the SNP said.
Yeah.
I think Keir Starmer would quite pleased to be talked about.
Albeit for breaking yet another promise. Lots of thumbs up from the SNP front bench as well from that. They particularly enjoyed that. Where are we going next, Lara?
We are going to the Labour MP, Vicky Foxcroft. I think it'd be remiss of us not to have one local election themed question from this best thread. This one's potentially more interesting because it's about voter ID. Of course, we'll be seeing that tomorrow, and because Vicky Foxcroft has been in Medway, where Starmer and Angela Rayner are going later, and where Greg Hands, the Tory chairman, is tomorrow. So one of the key seats we'll be looking at.
With the note.
With the note, the very big note.
Right, let's take a listen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ahead of tomorrow's local elections, I've been campaigning in Medway and Swindon. The word on the doorstep is that people are ready for a change and will be switching their vote from the Conservatives to Labour. However, I am concerned that only 4% of those without valid ID have applied online for a voter authority certificate. So will the Prime Minister commit to a post-election review of how many people have effectively been disenfranchised by his government's response to the virtually non-existent problem of voter fraud?
Mr. Speaker, 98% of people already possess a suitable form of voter ID, and the government made available free alternative ID for those that do not have it. The pilots have demonstrated it hasn't significantly impacted turnout, and indeed this was a policy that was introduced by the Labour Party in Northern Ireland all those years ago. It's common in European countries, it's common in Canada, and it's absolutely right that we introduce it here too.
This is a problem, isn't it?
It's just one of those that passes me by completely. I mean, open your wallet. You've got a driving licence. You've got all these other things. Wow. If you haven't got it and you care about voting, go and get what you need to get. It's not going to affect turnout because nobody's going to vote in these elections anyway. Turnout's going to be off the cliff low. Ayesha's now going to have a right old go. But as he says, this is totally normal in other countries that you just turn up. If you turn up and say, "Oh, I'm Mr. Blogs," and they cross your name off the list like they always did, I mean, what is that? I just don't understand what the fuss is about. It's a ridiculous thing for Labour to get upset about.
I think if there was a massive problem with people turning up and impersonating other people at the electoral
well, you go to Tower Hamlets on Thursday.
Okay, so Tower Hamlets was a different case, and actually it showed that the system worked. And that actually wasn't people impersonating them at the polling station. That was about proxy votes and postal votes. None of this legislation is looking at postal votes. This is basically going to impact on people who are likely to not be like Tim and organised. Some people from ethnic minority backgrounds who are very but lots of people don't have. I mean, lots of people don't have their papers. Lots of people don't have a passport. Lots of people don't have an identity card on them. The Cabinet Office's own figures say that they think 2.1 million people will be affected by this. Look, if this was a big problem, I would say absolutely bring it in. But most politicians say, right, you've got to encourage younger people to vote. You've got to make it easier for people to vote. You've got to really encourage people to vote. People are really, really busy. People are going to turn up, not realise this is happening, get sent home, and they're not going to come back.
Or maybe this is only we treat this as a trial. It's only for the local elections, and then everyone will know for next time when there's a general election, they'll know to bring it.
So I hope that happens. I hope there's a big information campaign. But one of the things I did a big piece on this last week. Even some Tory MPs are now worried. So part of it has got to be if your ID is up to date. So they're really worried that some of their older voters will turn up with a passport which is out of date from 20 years ago, and they will not be bothered to go home and come back again. And the other things are not capturing data on this, they're not capturing data on who is being turned away because they haven't got the right ID. And that is quite important if you are good faith, want to make sure people aren't disenfranchised. It's just a weird thing to make it more difficult for people to vote, which we should all think is quite an important thing to do.
Part of me also thinks if you just make the effort, Why do we need to make it easier and to vote?
Because I think
It's an important thing, get out and vote.
But if you're going to introduce that change, I think you have to do it over a lot of time with a lot of campaigning.
And actually, there was a survey one about 1 in 4 people didn't even know about it.
No, but hardly anybody.
Although probably far more people don't even know there's local elections.
But when it comes to general election, it's going to be very important.
There could be total chaos, and if the Tories start losing a bunch of pensioner votes as a consequence, it will have come back to bite them.
Yeah.
It's a very extreme measure to crack a problem that doesn't really
It's
exist.
not an extreme measure. It's a totally standard, normal measure.
But it will shrink the voter base, and it will shrink the left-wing
coming in here with your content.
The vast majority of people who have no ID would have no intention of voting to start with.
Well, we need to try and encourage people to. It just seems weird to actually want to shrink the franchise.
Anyway, for those who do vote, you can join me 10 o'clock on Thursday night. Is it tomorrow night? It's tomorrow night, isn't it? Another late night. So I'll be here 10 till 1 tomorrow daytime, then tomorrow night from 10 till 1 with a special election night lock-in.
What are you doing then? Have you got a sort of bed here for the afternoon or something?
Yeah, I'm just going to go to the pub. Okay. Anyway, lovely to see you all. Let's wind it up there before you all ends in fisticuffs. Lovely to see you, Tim Shipman, Ayesha Hazarika. Ayesha will be back. You on at the weekend?
I am.
Saturday from 4?
Yes.
Times Radio Drive. Tim will be in the Sunday Times. Lara will be in your inbox at
pop to see Ayesha.
3 p.m.
You never know.
3 p.m. Times subscribers can go to thetimes.co.uk/redbox and get Lara in your inbox at 3 o'clock. Lovely. Good. Right, up next we'll do the quiz, and we're also going to find out, we're going to talk a bit more about the coronation and how the king goes down in Wales. We'll do that next on Times Radio.
Times Radio Breakfast with Asma Mir and Stig Abel.
The Lord Great Chamberlain, Lord Carrington, joins us, but he's got the right to address the monarch on Coronation Day. He'll explain to us, that's me, Stig Abel, and the Lord Great Chamberlain herself, Asma Mir.
Well, I was going to say that's the letters editor, Andrew Riley, who's going to be here. And our panel after 9 is John Witherow and Ayesha Hazarika.
Times Radio Breakfast with Asma Mir and Stig Abel. Tomorrow morning from 6 on Times Radio.